Hello and welcome to yesterday's Airlines. I have just spent the last 5 or 6 days in Spain visiting the wonderful city of Seville and also a quick side trip to Cordoba, and I'm now back to do more 400 scale work at the site. Gotta say that if you ever get the chance to visit Seville, it is well worth going. Wonderful, wonderful city. And a nice little airport actually as well, though that was not the reason for me going. In my absence, there has been the next announcement from the major 400 scale brands, and that is jcwings, who tend to announce their models right at the end of the month. So these, I think, were announced on the 30th or the 31st of May, and they have a bunch of quite interesting models for us this month. I have to say that I've given JC a little bit of stick recently for how boring some of their releases have been. But I do feel this month that there is a definite uptick and there is more interesting content. These are not just versions of previous releases, they are quite fresh. And that is, well, really nice, I guess. So we'll get over and be looking through these in a few minutes. Obviously, before I do that, make sure you subscribe to the channel if you like the content, and I hope you do. I will be producing more of this kind of material. I obviously produce also material in relation to new mold samples and custom models and all kinds of other 400 scale related stuff at the YouTube channel. Also, check me out on Instagram. Really pleased to have just eclipsed 4,000 followers on that site, which I've not been on too long, to be honest. And don't forget, yesterdaysairlines.com is the place where the majority of my material emanates from. So always keep an eye out at the site for a really wide range of material in relation to 400 scale, but also the occasional 200 scale and 600 scale as well. Okay, but enough of that. Let's get on and check out what jcwings are offering us. I was going to say this month, but it's going to be a little bit longer than that, but offering us in the next few months. Okay, so this month's release set includes, well, it depends how you slice and dice it, as always with JC, because they do have flap down versions, but ignoring the flap downs as separate releases, then you would say that there are 8 releases and 9 models, because one of them is unusually a twin set. There are also another 5 models which have been announced but are nowhere near getting released, so they are future releases. As is always the case with JC, their future releases are often a long way down the road, so I would not be pre-ordering these, and they could take years to come out, literally. However, as I was saying in the intro, a lot of the models in this batch are models that I'm finding quite interesting. They are reasonably unique, and that has not necessarily been a feature of JC releases in the last 4 or 5 months, so it's good to see. We start off with the Airbus product, as always, and as with these JC videos in general, I'm going to start with the models which have got actual photographs in existence for the release, so you know that they'll be out probably within the next couple of months, depending on where you are in the world. Sometimes it takes longer for them to reach you, but within 2 to 3 months, models that tend to have actual images of themselves appear. And we're going to start with an Airbus Industries A330 Beluga XL. So this is the A330-700. The reg is FWBXL. It's not the first time that reg has been released, but it is, as far as I can see, the first time that this particular version has been released, in the sense that it is wearing the test colours, or maybe I'm telling a porky pie. I can see actually that this model was released by NG. In fact, it was their first release, so it has been made before. Basically, it's wearing the standard Airbus Beluga house colours, but it's got red lines on the door at the front, and it's got some red areas on the tail as well. So it's got some kind of test markings on it. Obviously, the big difference between the JC A330 Beluga XL and the ngmodels version is that the JC version is interactive, that you can open up that main cargo door, which is a really nice touch. And it does make up somewhat for the mold overall not being quite as nice as the the NG version, which I think is better undercarriage and has a better sized horizontal stabilizers. But I quite like the JC version. That interactive element is something that I think works really well. Then again, there's only so many liveries you can release on the Beluga XL, and they all tend to look roughly the same. So this is not exciting me. It has been made before, but not in the interactive version. So this one is going to be nice, but nothing special. And I've already got as many Beluga XLs as I need, so I'm just going to put this one into Workhorse because it is a model that's been made previously, and it's very similar to several other versions that have been made both by JC and NG. Next up is a Boeing 737-800. It's Garuda Indonesia. It's an airline which JC like quite a bit. It's also an airline that Phoenix like quite a bit. And so this is, or will be, the 18th 737-800 in Garuda colours that has been made. And a lot of those have been by JC and Phoenix. I'm looking through, I can see, I think 4 JC versions and 8 Phoenix versions. So that's a lot. It's a shame, therefore, that both of them have got pretty mediocre 737-800 moulds. This aircraft is PKGMZ, and it is wearing the 75th anniversary colours, which are quite understated. It has been made before by Phoenix. It was made not that long ago by them in 2020. And actually, even though I don't like the Phoenix 737-800 a lot, they did an okay job on this one, and at least got the cockpit windows in the right place. So, yeah. Will this one be that much better than that? Not really. The mould isn't great for JC in this space either. It's weaker in different ways, which is interesting. The Phoenix 737-800 is not a spectacular model. This one is also not. The JC version, I've talked about this before, the undercarriage door's too big, the engine's not quite the right kind of shape, and the fans are far too far recessed into them, and the nose and just overall look of it is not spectacular. It's not a great mould, and it's not one that I personally look out for or try to acquire, especially when there are much better versions from NG or Panda around. So this one isn't really doing it for me. There have been lots of Garuda 737-800s. The scheme isn't particularly exciting, this 75th scheme anyway, and the mould isn't great. So actually I'm going to put this one down into Gas Guzzler. So it's not been a great start, the first 2 models, but stick with me. The models improve quite significantly from this point onwards. Moving into jumbo territory, and we have another example of the newish jcwings 747-400 mould, which is gradually getting a little bit of usage, which is nice. JC have quite a thing for government liveries, and this one is Q8 Airways. The reg is 9KADE, but Q8 Airways only had a single 747-400, and it was actually being operated for the Kuwaiti government for the majority of its service history. It's even a combi actually as well, which is quite unusual. So it wears basically the standard Q8 Airways livery, even to the extent that it's got Q8airways.com titling, but it does have this special crest or seal ahead of the main titles. It didn't wear that for the whole of its career actually, but in most of the pictures, it does seem to have it. It looks really nice, as you would expect on the mould, which is a really, really good mould, one I like a lot, except for the fact the undercarriage is a little bit low. Have to kind of accept that. This is a release that's going to be coming in flaps down and flaps up versions, and yeah, I think this is really nice. Nobody else has made a Q8 Airways 747-400 in this scheme. There has only been one other Q8 Airways 747 made, and that was by Aviation 400, Series 200, a long time ago. I will not be buying it myself. It's a little bit too modern for me, and it's not quite, because it's kind of like a quasi airline livery. It doesn't really suit my collection criteria, and my Middle Eastern shelf is overflowing too. So I won't be getting it, but I like the look of it. It's unique. It is going to be a super nice model, I think, and this one is easily scoring high flyer. That's the only Series 400 747 this month, and we move on into 777s. Next one up is also going to be available in flaps up and down, and this one is for an, I always hasten to call it an airline. It's not really an airline. It's called Privilege Style. I didn't realise this carrier even existed until a few days ago when I looked up Spanish airlines, since I was going to Spain, and I happened to see it. It's a carrier which calls itself a charter airline, but it's really, it seems to be operating more as a kind of private operator, hence the name. And when you look at the aircraft, they don't carry titles. It's more like either a wet lease operator or a private charter carrier, rather than a standard kind of charter airline. It's got a very small fleet of 4 aircraft, only one of which is a 777, and the others are all individual aircraft types 2, A321, 75, 76. The livery isn't spectacularly exciting, I admit. It is smart though. Can't deny that livery is smart, but it's not particularly exciting. And like lots of Spanish carriers, it doesn't really say much about Spain. But it's nice and it's unique, and that's something, if you watch enough of these videos, that tends to mean that I score models higher. I also really like the jcwings 777. It is a fabulous mold. It is the best 777 in the scale, in my opinion, and more than just my opinion. Really, when you actually look across the molds, it scores the best. So again, I think this one's going to be high flyer. It's not my collection criteria, but it's good to see more unusual airlines being released, and this airline, Privilege Style, is, yeah, it is definitely unusual. So one that I think is deserving of a good score. The next model is also a 777-200, but this one isn't using exactly the same mold as the previous, and that's because this is going to be using the interactive mold which JC has developed along with geminijets, and this one is in the colours of Ethiopian Airlines cargo, ET Alpha Whiskey Echo. It's gonna be super nice. The pictures look really good. I really like the interactive feature, and you don't have the same nose cargo door issues here, obviously, that you do with the 747, because there's no nose cargo door. So people can't complain so much about how it looks when the doors are closed, as they often seem to with the interactive 747s. I think this looks really good. It's an exciting option to have interactive cargo airlines. It almost makes me more interested in buying cargo aircraft, which usually I'm not an enormous collector of. The Ethiopian scheme is simple but classy. Looks really good. Ethiopian is obviously a great airline that's doing very well and done good things for Africa. So all round, really, this one is looking good to me. In terms of Ethiopian 747s, or sorry, 777s, there have been some, but not many. Phoenix has made an Ethiopian cargo 777. They made one last year, and that looked nice as well, but I do not think that the Phoenixmodel is quite as good as the jcwings edition. It certainly doesn't have these interactive features. This one is going to trump it. And yeah, I guess it's probably the interactive side of things that's getting me interested in this. And actually, I'm going to put this one as supersonic. I like the innovation. I think this looks really nice. And of the models this month, this would be the one that I would be most likely to buy if I didn't. If I bought anything that I liked and I didn't at least pretend to have some kind of collection criteria. So yeah, supersonic for this one, very much so. So that Ethiopian 777 brings to an end the Airbus and Boeing portion of this month's releases, which is not often you get to say that and still have several models to talk about, so that's nice. Next up, the sixth model of this month's announcements is an Embraer 145, and it was only last month, I think, that I was talking about KLM XL. I won't go over the airline in detail again, but that was the first KLM XL announcement in 400 scale last month, an ATR 42, and this month we've got a second, an ERJ. The mould isn't as good as the ATR's mould, mainly because of the undercarriage. I've probably discussed this when Gemini have released using this mould before on their videos. The undercarriage is just too long, and they really could do with fixing it, certainly shortening the nose gear. But at the same time, it isn't disastrous. It's just not great. I have to say, the whole nose shape is not ideal, really. And there have been previously older versions of the ERJ made which look better, using a slightly modified mould with shorter gear, and I'm not sure really why we're seeing this version in use nowadays, but whatever. The model itself from the picture looks nice. The printing looks good, and KLM XL is a unique airline, as I was saying. So in that regards, this is actually quite a cool little model, probably one which will be welcomed by European collectors, albeit some of them will no doubt think this is classic. It isn't. It's from early 2000s. Nice little model, PH RXA, but I don't think I can give it high flyer because of the mold's weaknesses. I'm going to put this one in workhorse, I think, but I can understand why other people may rate this one more highly than I do. Next up, we're on to the twin set. And this is quite unusual for a couple of reasons. Firstly, because it's for Dragonair. I know they don't exist anymore, but usually Cathay and Dragon releases are well hidden and not on boxes that look at all like their jcwings boxes. This one looks like it's coming on a box which clearly is jcwings. So that's interesting. But it's unusual to get a twin set nowadays in 400 scale anyway. The two aircraft here are wearing the earlier orangey red cheat line scheme that Dragon first had, and then the later common Dragonair livery. And yeah, I'd usually welcome TriStars, but to be honest, I'm not in love with this mould. It's okay. When they first released the Cathay version that I got a few years ago now, probably 3 or 4 years ago, yeah, the molds, the undercarriage is too short. That's the first thing that's clear about it. Otherwise, it's not too bad. It's not great. It certainly doesn't compare to the ngmodels version. And NG have made the old scheme Dragonair with the same reg as this VRHOD previously. But then again, so have jcwings actually. So that's quite interesting. JC actually made this as an individual model not that many moons ago themselves. Back in, actually it's 2017, so 6 years ago. But it has been made, so effectively the one in the old scheme is a re-release, and the other one I think is a unique release and hasn't been made by NG or anybody else. So yeah, I'm not sure about these. I would much prefer to get the NG version myself. I'm not going to be buying this. I've already got the NG Dragonair in the old scheme, so can't get one and not the other here because they come in a twin set. Doesn't make sense to be buying them. Yeah, I'm just going to workhorse this pair. The mould is, it's okay, it's not great. It's certainly inferior to NG, and eventually NG will get around to making that other Dragonair, I'm sure. So the last of the coming soon models is a McDonnell Douglas product, and in this case it is a Martinair MD-11 PH-MCP. Recently JC has shown a real interest in Dutch aircraft, and there's nothing wrong with that. The jcwings MD-11 is a really solid and decent mould. It is basically the same old Gemini mould, but heavily modified with new undercarriage, much in the same way that Phoenix modified the same mould with new undercarriage, except that JC have done a better job because their undercarriage doesn't make the aircraft look like it's on stilts. So I do think that this is a better mould than the Phoenix version, and actually looking back through the Martinair MD-11s that have been released, there's only been one wearing the standard old Martinair scheme that this aircraft is wearing, and that was actually made by Dragonwings way back in 2001. The Dragon MD-11 is actually excellent, not far off being as good or even better than this one, but obviously it's very old. So this is another good choice actually, and should be a nice model, and certainly a model that is slightly tempting me, though again it doesn't quite fit inside my criteria. It's certainly tempting me more than the recent Phoenix MD-11s, as I say, mainly because of the undercarriage. But yeah, I like this. I think this will be nice. Again, I don't think it's my collection that's going to be graced by it, but I'm sure lots of people will be interested in it, and I think this is again a high flyer. It's an aircraft that hasn't been made for a long time in this scheme, well deserving of a re-release on a modern mould variant with aerials and rolling gear and those later additions. Okay, cool. So that is the end of the look at the aircraft which jcwings have announced, which will come out in the near term. There are still, as I said at the beginning of the video, 5 models, or 7 if you include the flaps down versions as separate, that have been announced, which will be coming out a lot further in the future, possibly next year, maybe even the year after, who knows. So let's have a look at those, but obviously bear in mind that these are going to have extended lead times. So of the 5 future models, the first one up is an Airbus, and again it is the only Airbus in this set, so there's only been the 2 Airbuses included in this month's releases at all, which is highly unusual. This one is also in Airbus industry colours. It is A350-1000 and it is FWMIL, and if that registration is familiar to you, it's because that aircraft has been released quite a bit recently, because it had been wearing the Qantas, what's it called, Operation Sunrise, something like that. Anyway, the Qantas titling that was added when the order was announced for that airline, and that was released by JC, Aviation 400 and NG, and Phoenix as well, I think. So pretty much everyone. So it wouldn't surprise me if this aircraft, which has just been announced by JC, will also get the treatment from everyone else too, because it is fundamentally the same, except that they've modified the titling, removed all the Airbus related bits and bobs, and now it's just got some extra text on it which says something along the lines of demonstrating enhanced operations for return to airport by Airbus up next. Don't know what that really relates to, some technical system no doubt aboard the aircraft, but that is the difference for this model. It's not especially exciting, there's just some tiles about it to the plane. Doesn't really fundamentally change the standard Airbus house colours. So for me this one's not particularly exciting. The JC A350-1000 is perfectly decent. Not as good as the Aviation 400 or NG version, but perfectly decent. So I'm going to put this one into workhorse. It's not thrilling me, the livery is pretty boring. How many house colours A350s does any one person really need to own? Probably only 1 or 2. Next up, however, we're into slightly more interesting territory. As I said earlier on, jcwings likes government-related airliners, and this month we've got a 747-8 Boeing business jet in the colours of the Abu Dhabi Amiri flights. let's just get over the fact that they've got a 747-8 running around doing whatever the Abu Dhabi really needs it to do, because it's not the only BBJ they've got. I mean, it's ludicrous. But I'm just going to park that and talk about the aircraft itself. It's wearing quite a retro scheme with a cheap line. It looks smart. I remember, I think, in the 1980s seeing their 747 SP wearing basically exactly the same scheme. It looks smart on that too. And they've got a 7879 as well, which again looks nice in the scheme. Red sheet line, flag on the tail, done. So this will be a nice model. I like the JCWings 747-8, and I think it'll look good. The 8i especially looks better than Freya, as everyone knows, because of the hump. But I think this will look nice. It's not been released previously by anybody else. You could potentially argue maybe that these are spoilers for NG, but I don't think they are. I think that's unfair. JC released a decent number of 747-8s anyway, and this one should be a nice addition. Who knows when it'll show up, but it should be a nice addition. Even though I don't agree with the concept of flying a 747-8 as a BBGA, I'm going to put this one up in a high flyer. It's going to be a nice model. And next is a fantasy 747-8, which I feel, if it had been announced by NG, would be getting a lot more fanfare than it has being announced by JC, and I'm not really sure why that is, to be honest. It's a 747-8i in Landor colours, the British Airways Landor. So clearly a fantasy, but one which has potential to look really very nice, I have to say. It's not the first time JC have released a fantasy 747-8. They've made a Pan Am version previously. So this isn't completely out of line with what they've done before. And again, I don't think this relates to the NG models that are upcoming. I think JC have got their own agency and make their own models a lot of the time. This isn't like the A380 releases that were made to compete against the AB400 version. I think this one is a perfectly good model. No reason not to release it. And interesting comparison with the Boeing 747-8, which NG have announced. It is, I must add, massively disappointing that the best 747-8s that you're likely to get are fantasy versions, because it just illustrates how poorly the aircraft is sold, which is a real shame, not just for model collectors, but for aviation enthusiasts in general, really. But the Landor scheme, fits the 747 really well. The 747-8i mold is really nice. Everyone loves the Landor. I'm sure this will sell super well, and it should look really good. So I actually think that this is a really nice fantasy model. And yeah, I'm tempted to give it a good rating, I have to say. I think that it is nice, and I'm slightly tempted to get it, even though, yeah, again, it doesn't really fit my criteria, and I don't really collect many fantasy models either. But yeah, I think this one's high flyer as well, in my opinion. It's a good, solid fantasy model. It's not a kind of just random thing. I think that it makes sense. BA operating 747-8, it's not that strange, it's actually a bit surprising they didn't order it. And if they had have done, you can imagine one would have turned up in the Landor scheme, at least as a retro at some point. Yeah, I think it's a good idea, and it looks nice. So yeah, well done, JC. I think this is another high flyer. So yeah, some nice models in this set, and a couple of these which I don't think will be released particularly soon by others. Now, the next model is a 767-300. This one's CGHLV. It's Air Canada Cargo, wearing the kind of the Air Canada Rouge version of the cargo scheme. This one is probably the least interesting of these upcoming releases, and that's mainly because this one has been made before. It's already been made by Phoenix, and it was only made this year, so it's very recently been made by Phoenix. And the Phoenix version looks good, to be honest. There's no real problems I can see with it. I like the Phoenix 767-300 mold. I like the JC one too, but would I wait a year or more to get the JC version over buying the Phoenix version if I was really keen on having one? Yeah, probably not. What's the point? I mean, they're both nice molds. They've both got different pluses and minuses, I admit, mainly around the wing, but yeah, I don't think I would wait. And so I don't really see a reason to be scoring this one highly. It's got competition which is already out there in the marketplace, which is good. I'm going to give this one a workhorse. It's still going to be a lovely model when it comes out, but that's some time away. And that leaves just the one remaining release this month to be announced. It's an aircraft which, again, I imagine will get releases from other brands as well. It is an Iraqi Airlines Boeing 787-8, and the aircraft was only just delivered, so it's almost certainly going to get some releases by other brands. NG, I would have thought, will be releasing this, though I'm just guessing. It wouldn't surprise me at all. So does that, yeah, as always, it's difficult. Does that make this model less desirable from jcwings? Yeah, a little bit, because of the wait time. The JC mold is excellent, so it's not anything to do with that. I'm sure they'll do a good job. The Iraqi scheme is really nice, and this is quite a cool aircraft. So it'll be a nice model, but it's just going to take a long time to come out. And I think I'll put this one into High Flyer too, actually, but with a caveat that obviously there is likely to be upcoming competition, so don't pre-order. Wait and see what happens with other models, other releases from other brands. So yeah, I mean, overall, this month, I'm actually really pleasantly surprised by what jcwings have produced. Unlike the previous months where you've got all these subtly different variants or re-regs of models that have been made previously, this month you've got some really fresh material. The Q80-744, the Privilege 777, that Ethiopian Interactive, the Martinair MD, and even some of the future models are quite cool and not the sort of thing you're going to get from everyone else. Those two 747-8s be unique, I imagine, for quite some time. So there's some really nice stuff this month, and I think that jcwings have, you know, put together a really solid bunch of models. And I might add that one of the reasons they're probably more solid this month than previous is because these are mainly wide bodies, and when you look through the JC mold catalogue, their wide body molds are much stronger than the narrow bodies. Yeah, 737s, the A320s, they're a lot weaker than their 777s, their 747s, their A350s. So that's also a factor that plays into this month actually being a solid scoring month, a really good month with a supersonic and quite a few high flyer releases, in my opinion. Okay guys, well that's it for this video. As I said earlier, please subscribe to the channel and keep an eye out for more content. I'm sure there'll be more releases coming up soon. Obviously, I haven't done a video for the NG future releases, and the reason for that is that, as I understand it, they are not, say, the June releases. There will be a June set of releases, which will include now some of those future releases. So it's a little funny. I don't really understand why NG have done that. So when NG do announce their June releases, I will do a video. But until then, or until the next video, which will probably come before that, keep an eye out for all your 400 scale news at yesterdaysairlines.com and the Instagram channel, and obviously here on YouTube. Thanks very much for watching, guys. I'll see you later.